Hello and welcome to Celtic Down Under. My name is Laura and I am joined by Liam as we kick off the World Cup preview for Group F. And we're going to start this one with Canada, as you can tell by Liam's wonderful Maple Leaf shirt there. Liam, how you doing?
Good. I'm surprised that we're in this group because I always thought Canada was Group A.
Oh,
We joke from my Canadian friends there that are listening.
yeah, but also made me absolutely freak out because let's just say our historical accuracy with the groups while recording these has not been fantastic, and I was worrying that
No.
we'd completely messed it up this time. So, no, it was just one of Liam's dad jokes, so
Yep.
that's fine.
Yep.
Canada, I have to say, are a bit of a surprising package because I was all ready to congratulate them on their first appearance at the World Cup, but of course, this is not their first appearance at the World Cup. Mexico 1986. They did get to the group stage of the finals of the World Cup. Unfortunately, however, they played 3 matches, lost 3 matches.
They for
scored
78
zero goals.
minutes. For 78 minutes, though, they shut out Platini's France, who were the European champions at the time.
That they did do.
You know.
And you know who knows what they could do going forward. Just looking at Canada as a team going forward, I think that the name everybody mentions and that everybody knows, and we'll pull up the squad here. The name everybody mentions and everybody knows is obviously Bayern Munich's Alphonso Davies. Interestingly listed as a striker in this squad because I do know that he plays that forward role for Canada, but he can basically play anywhere up and down that side of the pitch.
Yeah.
Is it unfair to say that this is essentially a one-man team? Is there more to it than that?
Oh, there's definitely more to it than that because Canada have a bit like Qatar, who we talked about earlier. They're aware that they are going to host the next World Cup. So to that end, they put a lot of resources into growing soccer, as they call it, in the country. And it's actually paid off earlier than anticipated because they're ready to go 4 years before they actually host the tournament. And they topped the North American qualifying group above the likes of USA and Mexico, who we kind of come to expect as almost always being at the World Cup, and yet Canada finished above both of them.
Yeah.
So that really is something that should be acknowledged. No, they're every World Cup. We talked previously about Costa Rica and how they took 2014 by storm. Everybody remembers Cameroon 1990. They remember the South Korea team of 2002, albeit with a wee bit of help from the referees. There's always that quote-unquote wee team that comes in and takes the tournament by storm. And Canada might be it. They might be.
Yeah. I mean, looking at the group that they've obviously got Belgium in there who are big hitters. But when you look at their fixtures, they've got Croatia as well, who are big hitters, and then Morocco, who've got some favoured players as well. So it's going to be difficult to see where the impact can be made. But what I wanted to do is have a look at the qualifying, because there was an interesting point we were raising in the Costa Rica video, which I wanted to follow up on with the Canada video, which is, there's a lot of positive PR going around about the USA. And whether they can have an impact. Nobody's really talking about Costa Rica or Canada. Canada obviously had a 2-phase qualifying procedure where they had to overcome in round one a group containing Suriname, Bermuda, Aruba and Cayman Islands. Understandably, they absolutely walked that one. But when you go to round 3, they topped a group that contained the likes of Mexico, USA and Costa Rica. Given the plaudits that we've given Mexico in their pedigree and appearances at World Cups, how much do you think Canada can use what has been a very positive qualifying campaign to translate that to World Cup finals, or is it a completely different ballgame for you?
Well, the thing is that nobody outside of football anoraks like us, or North American fans are going to really even care about that. But I think that Canada, going the other way, Canada have the benefit of coming into this tournament as a team that not a lot of people know much about.
Mm-hmm.
As you say, there's Alphonso Davies, and the minute you say Canada and football, once you establish that it's actual football and not that weird American sport with crash helmets that you're talking about, the conversation goes to Davies. And outside of him, people don't really know anything about this team.
You're doing my man David Witherspoon down here, the engine room of St Johnstone's midfield, but you know.
Well, I mean, you know, I thought it was quite interesting a couple of weeks ago when Scott Arfield said, "I'm available," and Canada said, "We know."
Listen, he wouldn't fare too well. There's far too many Eintracht Frankfurt players amongst all the squads as we've seen already.
Aye, well, you know, let's see how good his Benny Hill salute is when his team are getting beat 4-0. You know? But anyway, thankfully he's not in the Canada squad, so I can actually support Canada with a clear conscience.
Absolutely, and that we will do. Let's look at where you will be supporting them. Obviously, as having the honour of being the first team in the group that we are reviewing, we'll be able to look at their at fixtures from their perspective initially before we look at anybody else. Again, do you know, I'll say this for Canada to defend them a little here. We've talked about teams having a hard opening match or teams having a hard closing match. I can't think of any other team in the World Cup that we've covered so far who's got such a tough opening 2 games. Belgium and Croatia. You know, they don't have the option to wait until Morocco to get something from it. They are going to have to get something from either the Belgium or Croatia match. Can they do it?
They can. I don't know if they will, but they can. The thing is, both Belgium and Croatia are squads that I think, although still very, very capable, have passed their peak.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Belgium are still relying on guys like Vertonghen, who are well into their 30s. The whole engine room of the Croatia team is still Luka Modric, who, even though he is 37, we, you know, as Celtic fans, we've seen firsthand how good he still is. But he is older and, you know, still a great player, but not the player that took Croatia to the final at the last World Cup, you know. So both of those teams have the same weakness. The question is, do Canada have the capabilities to exploit it? And I would say that possibly they do, because the profile of the Canada squad skews much younger than both Belgium and Croatia. On one hand, you can say, well, none of them have any experience of a World Cup, but at the same time, they also have no fear, because you cannot be afraid of something you've never experienced. Right? And also, like I say, the idea that outside of people like us who do our homework, very few people are looking at Canada as one that most people have got, Belgium first, Croatia second, this group's sewn up. I don't think it's that simple. I think both Canada and Morocco might have something to say about this group. But more so Canada. Just because, you know, people are heavily touting USA to qualify second in England's group, right? And yet no one is even mentioning Canada, and we're forgetting that Canada at the moment are a better team than America. So, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens in that first match, because it's going to tell us a lot about what Belgium are going to do in this tournament. Are they going to show up? But it also will show, is Canada one of those teams that could do a Cameroon? You know.
The other interesting point, I don't know if you've had a chance to look into this, but I can't think of another person who's had quite the same route to national team management as manager John Herdman of Canada. So he's an Englishman from County Durham who used to manage part-time while he was a university lecturer at Northumbria University. He then moved to New Zealand and managed the New Zealand women's team between 2006 and 2011, then the Canada women's team between 2011 and 2018, before being appointed the the men's national team coach. It's just an interesting thing to see because I can't think of many coaches, male or female, who've made that switch from women's football to men's football, and then never mind talking about the amount of success that they would have had. Is he potentially going to be a bit of an unknown quantity? He's still a reasonably young manager. Is there potential he could bring something new to the table that maybe a lot of other managers might not have?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm quite a strong advocate of the women's game, as you know. I'm actually looking forward to hopefully watching Celtic Hearts tonight before the World Cup opening game. And I really do think that it's great to see, regardless of what Canada do, it's great to see a manager getting recognition and being given his national team job on the basis of what he accomplished in the women's game.
Yeah. He is actually, in terms of official records, the first manager in history to lead both the men's and women's national teams to a World Cup.
That's incredible. That's really, really good.
Which, there's a lot to be said about the women's game, both positive and negative, and I am not probably even as big an advocate for the women's game as you are, Liam, but it's just a fantastic thing to point out there to see the more that those lines get blurred, the more that those borders get blurred, it's going to be better for the health of both games, I would imagine.
Well, that's one glass ceiling smashed in the terms of a women's coach progressing to become the men's national coach. What you want now is actually a woman to become a men's national coach at some point in the future after achieving success in the women's game. That's going to be the next big step. When is a club or a country going to take the gamble and say, do you know what? This coach has made the women's team incredible. What could she do with the men's team?
Yeah.
That's the next big step. And
I don't know if she's ever... I don't know if she's ever ended up managing the England national team, but Emma Hayes, Chelsea manager, I think is probably about as close as any female manager has come to managing a men's team, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with her over the next few years. But I don't think it's too far off in the future.
I hope not. I hope not, because I think that the women's game will continue to grow. And actually, I have a friend over here from an American who is quite disdainful about the men's game in terms of all the play acting, the theatrics, and he is a big fan of the women's game. And it's very interesting to get, because obviously as an American he grew up watching ice hockey, baseball, etc. Football wasn't a thing for him, but the women's game exploded really from the 1990s onwards over there, and Canada has caught on to that as well. And I think, as we talked about with the US team, I think it's the same with Canada, that the women blazed a trail into which the men are now following.
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of how it's happened in most European countries. So it's really, really good to see that.
Yeah. Going back to the men's team in this particular World Cup, which is what we're essentially here to talk about. I guess my only thing about Canada would be, you mentioned about your dad saying there are a lot of teams he would term Kuttenbusters. Could Canada be that, considering the size of the teams they're coming up against in their group? Not necessarily for qualifying from the group, but certainly maybe somebody who thinks they're putting a safe bet on Belgium against Canada, that Canada could upset them.
I'll go out on a limb here, right? Slightly. Canada will take at least 1 point from either Belgium or Croatia.
Okay.
They will not lose both those games. I think that will happen.
Well, that'll be an interesting thing to see, because if that is the case, as is always the case in these 3-game World Cup groups, if they manage to do that, they will go into that last match against Morocco knowing that Belgium and Croatia don't have an easy game against each other, feeling that they have to win it, and Canada thinking, if we can get 4 points here, there's a chance we could go through. So
Canada are in the same boat as Japan, right? Yeah. They're in a group with 2 teams that are largely expected to qualify fairly easily. But that speaks to a lot of people not really knowing the culture of Canada or Japan in terms of football. because they're more competitive than I think they're being given credit for.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I think that there's a lot of people who, one, I've got a lot of Canadian friends over here. In fact, I'll go so far as to say my two best friends in Japan who are not Japanese are both Canadians. So I've got a lot of love for the country and the people. But they are all very excited about this because they're like, yeah, you don't know what you're about to see here. Canada are a lot better than a lot of European fans, as they say, are giving them credit for.
Yeah, I certainly, for one, you always pick out teams who you don't know an awful lot about, but there's just something about them that you think, I'm going to be looking forward to seeing what they can bring to the tournament. And I think for me, Canada are that. Like, they're certainly a team who I'll be trying to catch as many of their games as possible. I mean, obviously, Belgium and Croatia being in the group, I would have been watching those games anyway, but Canada is going to be a team that I'm going to really be excited, because I think from what I know of them, they try and play an exciting brand of football. Their counterparts in the USA, from my understanding, play a lot more of a defensive game. So, it'll be interesting to see if Canada can really take the game to these other teams and give them a surprise and to put a Celtic spin on it in much of an Ange Postecoglou kind of way of just playing their game the way they want to play it, regardless of who they're up against.
Well, I would double down on the Celtic comparison by saying that when you watch a Canada game, I think that the one thing we know is there's going to be a show. Yeah. It'll be an entertaining game. That's for sure.
I really hope so. Thank you very much for joining me for this preview of Canada. That kicks off our previews of Group F. We've got Belgium, Croatia and Morocco to come. Liam, thank you very much for joining me. And I have to say, as much as I was excited about the World Cup beforehand, the fact that we sit doing these videos really gets me more amped up for it as the days go by. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Same here.